haggling with a fella halfway down the queue, managed to get a ticket off him.
Kenny Cunningham had to do a bit of haggling to get into
Richmond
Richmond Park.
Yeah, a bit of haggling, yeah.
You're listening to House of Football, brought to you by SportsJOE and William Hill.
Welcome to the House of Football with SportsJOE and William Hill. I am flying solo in the host seat this week, but I'm not flying solo in the studio because I'm joined by one of Ireland's most consistent and decorated defenders, the most dependable footballer on the pitch, and one of Ireland's most respected and most loved pundits. It is the wonderful Mr. Kenneth Edward Cunningham. Kenny Cunningham.
Consistent. It can only get better after that. Consistently poor level of performance.
No.
You can read into that what you want. You
are Mr. Consistency. All them usually play for him. When I knew Kenny Cunningham was in the 10.
5, 6 out of 10. Never. Time.
At least a 7. At least a 7 every time. At least a 7. And at one point, and I will say it, Steve Bruce called you the best defender in the Premier League during that season with Birmingham.
A weak moment on his part.
And you're being incredibly humble, Kenny, but it's fantastic to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah,
happy to be here.
So we want to tap into your knowledge, your vast knowledge of all things football.
We short interview then, Eric. That'll be 10 minutes max. We'll be out here.
So all that knowledge can be written on the back of a postage stamp, that kind of thing, is it? Yeah. No, not at all. Look, but first things first, before we, it's been done to death because it happened last week. The game against France, it was a decent performance. Stephen Kenny is still the manager. He's divided a lot of the footballing fraternity in Ireland. Some are pro Kenny, some are anti Kenny. Where do you sit in relation to that, Eric? I'm very pro Stephen Kenny. Genuinely, I am, Kenny. I think he's what he's trying to do is very noble. Some people might think it's a bit too much of a stretch for him to be playing an expansive game of football, given the players that he has at his disposal. But I still think his intentions are pure, and I think he's going about it in the right way. And it'll be interesting to see what your feelings are about the Kenny reign so far.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's not an easy thing what he's trying to do in playing that more open, expansive type of football. And you're right, you've got to be realistic in terms of the individual qualities of the players that you have at your disposal in terms of what you're asking them to do. But yeah, no, I think your point's a fair one. When you're trying to make that kind of transition, which Stephen has done with the team in terms of the playing style, a degree of patience is required. But to be fair, I think he's probably had that from the general kind of footballing public and the association in particular. I mean, you probably know better than me how long Stephen's been in the job. Time travels fast. Probably
2 years now.
Yeah, 2-3 years now. So I think we always felt maybe this qualifying campaign would be a good kind of barometer in terms of where we are. Had a lot of time with the squad, integrated a lot of young players into the squad during that time as well. That's very exciting. Some really talented young players. So pulling all that together, finding the right balance, kind of tactical setup as well, with that kind of football and philosophy you're talking about. And that's different, I think, Eric, a kind of philosophy in terms of how you want the team to play, but also the tactical setup. You know, they've got to complement each other as well. So, yeah, it was interesting, the game against France, because we didn't have the opportunity maybe to play that open, expansive type of football that you were talking about. That didn't bother me, to be honest with you. I always felt if we were going to beat France, it was always going to be off the back of a really solid defensive structure and maybe an effective counter-attacking game. That I always felt that's the way we were going to beat this French team. Never going to be able to take the ball off them for long periods with the quality which they have. So that's kind of how it panned out. I suppose a small frustration, not so much disappointment, is that we couldn't maybe get enough sustained pressure on their goal and create enough opportunities during the course of 90 minutes. I thought defensively we were fantastic. The organisation was great.
One mistake really cost us the game, and it's probably down to the fact that Stephen Kenny wants us to play football, but we should be playing football in those areas, kind of thing, like, you know.
Yeah, nothing wrong with playing. Just decision making has got to be right, and that's not easy to do, and that's an easy thing to say on the edge of your box. Just make the right decision in terms of your passing. But you know, when the pressure comes on, and in the back of your mind, you know Josh Cullen receives that ball, he doesn't want to play it back to front too early. He knows he's only got one target up the pitch. I mean, I was a little bit surprised. I felt we were going to play with the two centre forwards, myself, and a narrow midfield three. We didn't do that. We dropped Ogbene right side of a midfield forward and played with Ferguson as a lone striker. And that made it difficult for me to play that kind of quick counter-attacking game, because when you win the ball back deep early and you look up the pitch, far better as a defender. I know this when you see two targets up the pitch to hit.
You've got options.
Yeah, rather than one striker who's surrounded invariably by two opposition defenders. So in that situation, if the quick ball up to the front striker isn't on, you got to play your way up the pitch. and that's not easy. So I think Josh was doing the right thing. If you looked up the pitch, that ball to Evan Ferguson wasn't on. Well, where's my next pass?
Yeah.
And I think there was passes on, just wasn't on the same wavelength. Jason, I think it was spinning in behind to look to have the ball over the top. So just a lack of communication and just decision making in that split.
And Pavard just read
cost us. Yeah, and he read it. So I wouldn't be overly critical of Josh Cullen. Why isn't he kicking the ball up the pitch? Because like you say, we don't kick the ball up the pitch now. The manager encourages the players to play the ball from back to front, slowly, short, maybe passes as well. So, yeah, it costs us. But I think generally speaking, defensive structure was absolutely great. But because we were very mindful of the French and we played in the system that we did, I think we found it very difficult to get up the pitch, to get from back to front quickly with that lone strike and get a foothold in their half and kind of build pressure on their penalty box. So I don't know if you can't remember like a 2, 3, 4 minute period during the game where we had them penned in their penalty box, maybe late on.
There's a couple of corners, I suppose,
yeah,
wasn't there?
Yeah, exactly. A couple of balls down the side first half. Ogbene 1v1 against Hernandez, who defended like poorly all evening, gave us some cheap free kicks, corners, got some crosses kind of into the box. So, but that was it. But in terms of general play, building our way up the pitch and getting sustained pressure, then we found that difficulty. So we gained in some respect in terms of the tactical setup for me from our defensive structure, but we kind of suffered a little bit because of that in terms of maybe being able to get up the pitch and create chances. But I totally understand how the manager set up the team. I was impressed with it, and just like everybody else, I suppose, a little bit kind of frustrated we didn't manage to get a point from the game. I think we had a score late on, Eric, the header from Nathan Collins. I think we could have argued with some justification we'd earned it.
Yeah.
Maybe the point over the course of 90 minutes. But that said, having not scored and having lost the game 1-0, probably a bit of a stretch as well to say that we was robbed.
Yeah.
Having lost the game 1-0. So that's kind of where we were during the course of the game. So, yeah, learn from it and move on. Hopefully better days ahead.
So that's Stephen. Stephen Kenny, of course, obviously came from a League of Ireland background. And Kenny, you've been involved in punditry with the League of Ireland. You were on co-com's duty there for the Shelbourne-Derry game on Friday night. I'm just interested to get your opinion, your views on the league as a whole and how you've seen it over the last few years. Do you see the standard has improved? There's great potential in the league. What's your views on the whole league as a whole?
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed the league. I've always kind of followed it from a distance and actively gone and watched games since I finished play. That's 15 years ago, I think I'm out of the game. And most of my work's been in Dublin since then. So anytime I'm in Dublin over the years, I've always taken a game if I could. But mentioned before we came on in there, probably the last, 5 years is probably as much League of Ireland football as I've watched. To be honest with you, probably the last couple of years, probably the only live football that I watch. A bit of work that I do, the Premiership, etc., and whatever else. Generally, you're talking kind of studio work. I'm watching the game in the box. In terms of live football, probably the League of Ireland is the most football that I watch, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the whole aspect of it, funnily enough. Being in Dublin predominantly is where I watch me football, but getting out to the game, you probably know what it's like. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah. Yeah, so for me, probably Talca Park, Daly Mount, Richmond Park, probably any of those three for me is gettable. Jump on the bus or whatever, or make me way. So it's just going to the game, isn't it? Just getting there a little bit early, a bit of a buzz outside, getting into your seats. It's more of an occasion thing, isn't it? And probably this year more so than any, Eric, in terms of crowds. It's been noticeable. It caught me by surprise a little bit. Yeah. Headed down to, it was Richmond Park in the season, Shell's game actually. Just poodled down as I normally would have, rocked up to get, into the shed down the sides there, hand over your cash and get your ticket in. Fella laughed at me like,
he said,
sold out. Yeah, sold out. So I had to do a bit of haggling with a fella halfway down the queue. Managed to get a ticket off him.
Kenny Cunningham had to do a bit of haggling to get into Richmond Park.
Yeah, a bit of haggling, yeah. €12. Not bad. €17 ticket for 12. Yeah. Your man wasn't budging. I started off at 8. I'll give you €8 for that ticket. I ended up at 12. Fair enough. But yeah, so that's caught me by surprise. And going in there to Richmond, great atmosphere. Always is Richmond, good crowd in there, bit of a buzz. So yeah, that's how the league's begun everywhere, isn't it? Daly Mount Park, as you'd know, Talca Park. I've been even actually down to Sligo a few weeks ago for Sligo in Cork, and that was a great buzz down there, to be honest with you.
It's a real football town, Sligo.
Yeah, people have said that to me, Eric, and I've been there for a long time. I've heard a lot of that, you know what I mean? It's a football town, they really come out, buzz. But until you experience it, and again, the same, heading down to the game, felt as if everybody was coming out. You know what I mean? That type of thing, heading for the flood. Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams, it's like the floodlights, everybody coming in there, build it and they will come. It was a kind of a sense of that in Sligo, and I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so all of that's going on at the moment, and that's great, because the conversation not too long ago, League of Ireland, how do we make it more attractive for people? How are we going to get the numbers in? Mm-hmm. Well, it's happened, isn't it, almost organically, because we haven't built all the stadiums in the last kind of 5 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's on its way. I think that's the next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'll know better than most, Daily Man. They need to get that sorted out. That looks fantastic, some of the chit-chat up there in terms of what they're looking to do up there, the new build, terrace areas behind the goal they're talking about, Eric. That could be absolutely standalone. Yeah. That could be phenomenal, 9,000-10,000 capacity.
It's an 8,000 seater stadium that they have, like a bowl, the Daily Man Bowl kind of thing, like, you know, and it's going to be a community facility in the Irish Football Museum and a plaza and all that. It's going to be a facility for the community, and I think that's what Bows and a lot of League of Ireland clubs are getting very good at, is going into the community and arousing that local interest. And as you say, when a League of Ireland match night comes around, it's a real community occasion. You see people coming from all angles. And what I love about the League of Ireland at the moment is I've seen younger and younger people going to the games. It's not all the Premier League. It's families are starting to go. So ideally, we would. In the perfect scenario, we'd have the facilities to accommodate these people. But it's encouraging so far.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, hopefully that'll come. Big plan. Yeah, other clubs as well. Obviously, there's issues at Tolkien Shells in terms of ownership, and that whole seat are coming on board there. Maybe a bit of investment coming in there. I think Pats are in good shape, good ownership there as well. There's plans there as well. So I think that's exciting going forward. But ultimately, it's all about what you're watching, the spectacle on the pitch as well. So I'm always encouraged by that. And the one thing, the standout thing for me, League of Ireland, Eric, has always been young talent.
Yes.
You know, young players in the league. I've always heard people, the level of football, this and that. I think the opportunity to move abroad a couple of years ago, Eric, was a given. Somebody came in for you, Div 1, Div 2, England, I'm off. God, it's not even a decision to be made. Yeah. But you look at the level now, the standard now, League of Ireland football, it's a competitive level, particularly this year in terms of the top 3, 4, 5 teams, and the carrot of like European football now. Yeah. I say it to people, I'd even say it to young players, have a think about this. I mean, the opportunity to play on the European stage, which a lot of League of Ireland players are getting now, Pats, Rovers, predominantly. I know it's all the top teams. You've got to get into that top 4 bracket. But it's phenomenal. You might never experience that again. You head over Div 1, Div 2 in England. You know, that's a write-off. I never played European. I played kind of Premier League football.
It's interesting you should say that, Kenny. Last week we had Damien Delaney and Ian Cartt on the show, and Ian was talking about, you know, he said he looked back at his career, he's no regrets. He played Premier League football, Champions League football, and he ticked a few boxes. And Damien came in and said, I've nearly ticked all those boxes, but I only ticked that last box, the Champions League box, when I moved back to the League of Ireland and played for Cork City. Yeah. So there you go, like, you know what I mean?
It's I don't think you should underestimate that. Yeah, it's not difficult. Yeah, hard to get that great Leicester team, of course, when they were a lovely teem. Yeah, but obviously I didn't play at that level, so the opportunity never.
No, you only played in World Cups, Kenny. You only played in World Cups.
Yeah, you're playing an Anglo-Italian Cup game, which stuck around for about 2 years in the early years over in England. Nobody remembers that. People scratch their heads when I mentioned the Anglo-Italian.
Well, there's a box not many people have ticked.
That's a stretch now, European competition. But so no, but in terms of your point, League of Ireland, I think it's in a great place. It was just a case of kind of grasping the net a little bit and kind of building on it. But yeah, no, it's great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and I'll more of the same between now and the end of the season. I think it's going to be a great title race.
So, right, we move on to things across the channel, the English channel, the Premier League. It's all kicking off over there. We don't know which manager's getting sacked today. There's like been too high profile.
Ten Hag, is it? After that performance,
we'll come to him, Kenny. We will come to him. But before we even begin the Premier League, I think we need to give a special nod to what I thought was the best goal I've seen this season, and our own Katie McCabe's goal for Arsenal against Man City on Sunday in the top of the table clash in the women's league over there. I don't know if you got to see the goal, Kenny.
I haven't seen it. I read about it, to be honest with you.
It was, and like considering on Wednesday night in the Champions League, she left the stadium in one of those foot braces, a correctional boot, if you will. And then comes back in.
Get a couple of them during the course of the new correctional boots.
More players are probably going to get into these correctional boots. If it corrects your boot to strike a ball as well as Katie McCabe struck on Sunday, I think a lot more players will be signing up for the correctional boot.
But anyway, left foot all right.
It was a cracker, an absolute cracker.
And the good news is she's fit, because obviously you first heard that, you thought, oh no, the games, obviously not so much the friendly games, but obviously what's coming down the road in the World Cup, and we got a couple of key players, I think, in that ladies' team, 3 or 4
that we can't do without.
Yeah, she's obviously one of them. So yeah, good to see she's back.
Right then, Kenny, we move on to the drama, the soap opera, if you will, that is the Premier League, and 13 Premier League managers have been sacked this season, and the latest one, the most high-profile one, was Graham Potter at Chelsea. What's your feelings on that? Did you think the time was right for him to go? Did he deserve it?
No, not necessarily. Yeah, people say, it's been coming. I know he's been under pressure for some time. Results haven't been good. I always felt, even up to a couple of months ago, I always felt, Eric, that he just needed to show the owners something, in terms of performance. Performance levels were improving, that there was something coming together. I think he found himself in a difficult position in terms of the turnover of players coming into the football. That's not easy. People think, what a great situation to be in. The owners thrown top class, some of the best young talent in the world. There you go, off you go, manage that. What more can I do for you? But it's not easy. Numbers can be an issue at a football club. I've seen that. We've got too many players around the first team squad coming onto the training pitch and getting a sense of, I'm not really involved in this, or actually getting separated from the main group in terms of training. But when you're separating top-class internationals, big money signings on big wages and saying, look, you six are going to have to train out. I haven't got room for you with the main group today.
That's incredible, that.
Yeah, that's a massive issue. And even within the main group, players who'll be in the group, as it gets closer to match day, you'll pretty much know the kind of starting team in terms of how the manager's shaping up. And you'll think, well, it looks as if I'm not involved at the weekend. So you need some pretty good professionals in terms that put that disappointment parquet and get behind the team and, put your kind of, sunny face on. And, be a kind of good professional in that sense. You don't always get that. So he's had to deal with that. That's not easy. No. A lot of grumpiness, discontent in the dressing room. I think ideally he would have liked more of a drip feed in terms of players. I think he would have been happy with the group that he got. Now, if you can add one or two going forward, happy days. And over the course of the next 12, 18, 24 months, we'll arrive at a point where you want to be. I think that would have been the kind of builds things organically almost. That's the impression I get with
100%,
Kenny. That's what he did at Brighton, wasn't it?
There's reports coming out today, the way when a manager gets sacked, then you hear all the stories behind the scenes. But one of the reports I thought was quite amusing today was, as you mentioned, the sheer volume of that squad, that in the data analysis room, players were sitting on the floor because there wasn't enough seats for the players, and in the dressing room for training, 3 or 4 of them have to get stripped in the corridor because it's too packed. Like it's a bizarre situation,
Yeah, those things matter. I didn't get the impression, you never know behind the scenes whether he lost the kind of dressing room. People talk about his manner, how he kind of carries himself, can that type of personality, top level, elite kind of players. I think that was a little bit unfair. I think that can work if the players understand that you got a good eye for a game. Your tactical setup is good, and if they believe that you can take them where they want to be in terms of compete for league titles, Champions League, etc., I think they'll kind of buy in. So I think that's a little bit of a process. So I think for me it was always time. We'll never know. I feel given time, Porter could have kind of torn things around, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me. That said, it'll just be very interesting now in terms of how they see it going forward. Will they go with somebody of a similar ilk, kind of young manager, and then give him more time, or will they go down a different route and say, right, we need a highly experienced manager in there who can come in and kind of hit the ground running with a serious kind of track record of success. That'll be interesting in terms of how the owners see it.
And also as a manager, like Graham Potter came in and did an amazing job at Brighton, and his career has just been on this upward trajectory, and maybe the job came too soon for him, but also the fact that he went to a club where he doesn't really get to decide which players he brings in. It's the director of football. He's bringing these players, right, here you go, there you go, there you go. I don't know. That's a system I don't think
can ever work. That's part and parcel, Eric, though, isn't it? There wouldn't be too many. What managers have that sole responsibility in terms of players' acquisitions today? Maybe Guardiola. You could argue. You'd imagine he'd have a pretty strong say
Klopp
in terms of which
player.
Yeah, Klopp to a certain extent. Even not so much there like that. That's more of a team decision up there in terms of their recruitment over the past couple of years. So I think he accept that really. I think he knew that Potter when he went in there. But I don't think he's that type of manager. I think he's the type of manager who would have gone in and said, look, yeah, I'm happy with what I've got. If we can add to it, great. Yeah, I'll have an input. I'll give my opinion. But yeah, this is my responsibility, the dressing room with the players. I understand we all have our own different strengths. Let's kind of work together. Yeah, exactly. Like I always got that impression. So I have a little bit of a sympathy for him because, like I said, I think the work he done at Brighton was phenomenal, Eric. The level he had Brighton playing. A lot of people talk about getting the most. He gets more out of what he's got. They're overachieving, boom, boom, boom. I don't think he can overachieve personally, himself. You only get the very best collective out of what you have available to you. And the very best managers can get close to that on a consistent level. And that's not easy. But he was doing that at Brighton. His last kind of 6 months at Brighton a year, the level they were playing at was phenomenal in terms of players he had at his disposal. These weren't top elite football players that he was dealing with. So for me, he couldn't have done any more in terms of making a pitch for one of those top 4 jobs. And I think potentially another opportunity could come again. Depends what he wants to do, take a break or whatever. But I think he's good enough to come back again. So a little bit of sympathy for him, but it's the nature of the beast.
And then we'll move on to the other high-profile second, Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers, he's highly respected in the game, and I think he's a good manager. It kind of fizzled out at Leicester this season. What's your opinions? Did you think it was time for him to go?
I can understand why it's gone. If all season, Eric, you've looked at him, particularly in the season, it didn't start well, did it? I think it started the end of last season, to be honest, and the recruitment in the summer.
Yeah, there was a lack of investment there.
Yeah,
as well,
I think there's issues there is in terms of financial fair play. I don't think it's the case of the owner side. We haven't got confidence, man. We're not going to give you money to spend. I think there'd been a huge outlay the previous couple of years whilst Rodgers has been there. I think that's why he took the job, to be honest with you. He's not a fool, Brendan Rodgers. He didn't take that Leicester job coming in knowing there was going to be no money to spend. And he was back for the first couple of years there. Serious investment. And they had a certain level of success. It was 5th place, wasn't the first couple of...
And did they win an FA Cup?
And they won an FA Cup, yeah. I'd still feel, though, those first couple of years, and Brendan Rodgers, he's no fool. He's referenced that a couple of times. My first successful years here, 5th place, as if to say it was almost an overachievement. I didn't think it was. I thought both of those seasons there was a chance to grab Champions League football. One of those seasons, I think, was when Liverpool imploded in terms of form. So a window of opportunity presented itself, probably similar to this year in terms of that top 4. And they faltered. They really stumbled. Both of those seasons, they really struggled kind of last 8-10 games of the season. Let the opportunity slip. And since then, it's been a drop-off, 8th position in the league. The FA Cup was obviously a big spike. But he clearly wasn't happy start of the season. You could tell in his interviews, kind of trying to say the right things, but letting it be known at the same time, he wasn't overly happy in terms of...
his hands were tied a little.
Yeah, hands were tied. What is what it is. But even body language sometimes, man, that spark seemed to have gone, Eric. Now, they found a little bit prior to the World Cup, a little bit of form, put a little bit of distance between themselves and the relegation spots. But post World Cup again, it's gone downward trajectory again. And if the owners got to a point, you keep your finger to the pulse and you listen to people around the place. If they felt as if there was a disconnect between the manager in the dressing room and the manager himself, hadn't got that kind of fire in his belly at this stage of the season to get them out, you could argue it probably was the right decision. Just change the dynamic a little bit, almost to kind of shock the dressing room. Someone like Rodgers, big personality. You take him out, suddenly the players, you're just hoping to get a reaction, a bit, bounce back ability, wherever you want to call it. Sometimes just getting rid of the manager, not necessarily getting another big one in, can sometimes kind of shock the dressing room a little bit and get a reaction from them. That's obviously what the owners are hoping. And
did you, in your career, Kenny, did you ever play, say, mid-season when a manager was sacked and then another manager was brought in, and what the feeling is amongst the squad and training? Is that that bounce back ability? It's such a cliche in football, but it's a genuine thing. You see it happen so often that it must be something tangible that players are like, okay, new manager, we've got to impress, we've got to raise our game. Is that have you ever experienced that yourself?
I've done my best to get a few managers to sack over the years, but I didn't suffer it too much. I got to be honest with you. I'm trying to think my early career. Obviously, Mick McCarthy there I had for a few years. Bruce Rick was there initially. Now Wimbledon, Joe Kinnear left after a couple of years, and it's kind of number 2. I think it's different kind of when a manager goes and maybe his number 2 comes in.
Right.
Not so much a shock to the system there. The players are very familiar with the number 2, etc., etc. I think generally speaking, it's when worst manager goes to number 2, everybody's out the door. And I think the bounce back ability is almost what I speak about. It shocks the players into kind of a reaction, but to kind of sustain that over a longer period of time, the man who comes in, he needs to have certain qualities in terms of good coach, manager, one-to-one rapport with the players, tactical setup, the players need to see all of those fundamentals. Ultimately, the players need to see that. If you're going to maintain that initial kind of bounce that you were talking about, oh, jeez, the gaffer's gone, oh, this is mad stuff, way. Out we go, onto the pitch, crash, bang, wallop stuff for a few weeks, nick a few points. Yeah. But to kind of sustain that Monday to Friday on the training pitch, you need to see that work, and you need to look at the new manager and his coaching staff and think, very switched on this. I like what I'm hearing here. I'm buying into this. So, it'll be interesting to see those sackings, what the kind of effect will have on the dressing room. But it's not a given. It's not a given that if you don't get that bounce initially, then very quickly it's the opposite. Players are like, oh no, manager's gone. We haven't got there. Where do we go now? Downward spiral, all the negativity from the press. You know, players hear that gets into their head. So that's why it is a gamble. You know, there's no guarantee when you make that type of tough decision. It can kind of go both ways.
Just on Brendan Rodgers before we leave him, Kenny. Some people are mentioning in the circles a future Ireland manager. Could you see that ever happening? And would you be for it?
Yeah, I suppose I could see it. You could name like a dozen, 15, like 16. In all honesty, managers, and you tick a lot of boxes in terms of track record, experience, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, I wouldn't be thinking in those terms, to be honest.
Right.
For the reasons that we said, probably a little bit disrespectful to the present the Irish manager. So, yeah, maybe that's a conversation down the line. I think there's there might be some good options there in terms of players who actually I played with Eric around the time. Lee Carsey's doing a great job with the England setup there, involved with
under 21 manager,
under 21s. Yeah, a lot of good lads out there getting good kind of coaching experience. Jim Goodwin's obviously managing up in Scotland. I've been watching him from a distance. Stephen Reid's been coaching at a very good level. Andy Reid's now in at Notts Forest. John O'Shea as well. I like the idea of integrating our ex-players within the coaching setup, and we've done that to a small extent under Stephen. John O'Shea has obviously come in. I don't like to see what we've seen, a lot of bouncing around in terms of coaches coming in, particularly in the first team setup. We've had a couple of examples, people come in the coaching staff,
Barry.
6 months, whoosh, better opportunity, grass is greener, right, I'm off, lads. So for me, that's not as easy. That decision's not as easy. Somebody who's got a real kind of emotional attachment to the country, to the jersey, John O'Shea had mentioned in that respect, that's not as easy. That bounce isn't as easy because you feel as if you're part of it. It's kind of in your blood. So I was delighted to see Josh get that opportunity from 21 and step up to the senior international. And I'd like to see that conveyor belt as well. Players come in, where it's 17, 19s, 21s as well, get a bit of experience there, and then maybe the opportunity to step up, work underneath the manager as John O'Shea is now. And who's to say maybe in maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, maybe for me that would be the natural kind of progression in terms of, well, there you go, Josh, you've been around, you know the players, you understand the setup. That'd be the natural progression for me, rather than looking to pluck somebody from the outside
and
in.
have to start from scratch again, kind of thing.
Yeah,
building
exactly.
relationships and all that kind of
just
thing.
constant motion, that type of thing. Bringing players into the setup, giving them good, having a look at them up close.
Yeah.
Just because like you're an international player with certain level of experience, you have so many caps or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got the attributes to coach and to coach at a very high level. So how are you going to know that? It's not easy to know when players are coaching at club level in England. If you're in the FAO and you're thinking, really want to integrate a couple of players here, our ex-players and stuff, and you're looking from a distance, and until you see people coach on the training pitch on a day-to-day basis, see how they interact with the dressing room, that's when you kind of know, we got something special here. Let's get this fella involved. So bringing them in, kind of young, underage, 17, 19, 21s, you have an opportunity to look at them actually up close. And you might look at them and think, you know what, great player as he was, not much there. Right. That's the way it is. Okay. Off you go. But there will be a couple of gems, and if they are, let's use them. Let's use them to our advantage.
Right, so we move back to the Premier League. I'm going to give you one word, and then you can go off on a tangent or whatever.
United. No, you're desperate to talk about.
It's the other shower.
You don't want to talk about it.
Liverpool.
United have won the weekend. They'd have won the weekend. We'd have been talking about United.
I want to talk to you about Ten Hag.
Liverpool lost. Liverpool's got beaten. You want to talk about Liverpool? Put that badness. Put that
big
to the side.
With Liverpool, Kenny?
Park it.
It's I suppose Klopp throughout his career, he's always been he's been a huge successful manager, and look, as you correctly pointed out, a Man United fan, I've looked on enviously at Klopp the last few years, and what an amazing job he's done there. But this year the wheels seem to have come off a little bit, and people point to his previous reigns as Dortmund manager. They play this high octane game, and is there a burnout element there? What's gone wrong with Liverpool this season?
Yeah, I know. I think it's simple enough, to be honest with you. It probably trace it back to, probably spoken about this a couple of times for me, that high energy game, high pressing game that you've spoken about. It is possible to do that as long as you have players who have the physical attributes to do that. They've got to be running machines, basically, and Liverpool had that for a couple of years. Like, physically, you just couldn't outrun Liverpool.
Incredible.
You couldn't bully. No team could bully Liverpool in football and competition. That was one of their strengths. They'd physically impose themselves. They'd get after you. They'd press you. high intensity runs, high intensity recovery runs, first minute to the last, didn't let you breathe, and that was the basis of their success. So they've come off that, and it hasn't been a choice that they've come off that. It's just individual players just can't play at that level anymore.
Just running out of steam a little bit, Kenny.
Yeah, exactly. So you look at Henderson, unfortunately, just drop off in terms of his physical levels. You could trace that back to the start of last season. Actually, so you look, for me, it's fundamentally that Liverpool midfield. You can talk about what's happened across the defensive line, drop off there, but for me, it all comes from that central midfield area, the drop off there, and that's had a ripple effect all over the team, particularly defensively. The defenders now are getting more exposed. That defensive line's getting more exposed than they've ever been. Individually, players are having to work harder, 1v1 situation, defend the edge of their box. Virgil van Dijk almost, unpenetrable for a period of time there. We've seen a number of mistakes from him. He's been a little bit loose. But all for me comes that central midfield area. No leg. Henderson's legs drop off. Fabinho's never been the quickest. People say, Fabinho's struggling. He's not getting around the pitch. He's never been able to get around the pitch, Fabinho, but he was protected for a long period of time in that pocket by Henderson. And really, Wijnaldum and Ishi and those two number 8s, just ferocious in terms of kind of physicality and speed and energy levels either side of him. Relentless. He was almost like, he almost like had playing in that pocket, Fabinho, just kind of pushing players around him, just kind of reading the game, stepping forward 5-10 yards. He was really an interceptor, Fabinho, on that team. Now he's having to cover bigger distances. He's having to cover 15, 20, 25 yards. And now people are looking and think, he's not moving great, Fabinho. His legs have gone. His legs haven't gone. He was always that type of player. He's just having to cover more ground now. He's getting more exposed now in terms of a lack of athleticism. So that's the interesting thing for me for Liverpool. If you just say, hey, you're going to rectify that, you go and get 2 top-class centre midfielders of that ilk in terms of have that kind of physicality, that box-to-box energy, a certain level of technical. But we all know who they are. Yeah. Bellingham's the obvious one. Declan Rice. He's been linked to a couple. Tuchmani, there was a little bit of chat before he went to Madrid. It looked as if they weren't in the market. He'd made his mind up to go to Real Madrid. That type of player. Camavinga's an interesting one. He was another one. You look at, people think, 100 million, 120, have Liverpool got that type of money? Well, I think they had 35 million probably a couple of years ago when Camavinga went to Real Madrid. That was a little bit under the radar. You look at him now, the performance against Ireland, if you look at him for Real Madrid the last 6 months to a year, you can see the talent that lad. That's the type of player Liverpool need. Yeah. Aggressive, physical, box-to-box, receive the ball under pressure, go and play, pretty much an all-encompassing central midfield player. I think that's fundamentally, for me, that's what Liverpool, that's the crux of the whole problem. That's what they have to fix. If they don't fix that, the other stuff that we're talking about in terms of defensively across the line won't resolve itself. And even with the lack of midfield resources they have at the moment, or a fading midfield force that they have at the moment, Kenny, do you think that's what's exposing Virgil van Dijk at the moment? Because he was heavily criticised at home from all the Dutch superstars, Van Basten, Hullet, for his performance against France in the 4-0 defeat. And I thought it was interesting that he came out with a comment afterwards and he said, look, I'm tired. I'm not a robot. And it was an interesting comment coming from someone of his stature. Yeah. To say that, to almost admit, I'm not as good as I used to be. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, For me, some of the mistakes he makes, tiredness doesn't come in. It's a mental thing for me with Van Dijk. Almost, he has that kind of arrogance, that confidence, that arrogance. And to be fair to me, he could back it up and has backed it up for a long period of time. But just for me, with him, he's a little bit loose. Always has been a little bit loose occasionally. When it comes to the rudimentary work of defending, the very basics that we talk about, always a little bit loose for me. The knee injury is an interesting one. 31 years of age. Has he got back exactly to the level that he was at previously? Even a slight drop off. You remember Van Dijk at his best, absolute Rolls Royce. Yeah. Balls over the top, down the side. You could give most centre forwards a yard or two. He'd make up that ground quickly. Don't quite see that. I'm not saying his legs have gone, but don't quite see that rapid acceleration that I've seen before. And you're right, the exposure that they're getting, that Liverpool high line has always been an interesting one. The only reason that succeeded as it did was because of that early pressure that those midfielders and forward players got on the ball higher up the pitch. That's why they could take that calculated risk in terms of keeping that high line. Opposition players in possession hadn't got time to get their head up, Eric, have a look, and play those clever little passes in behind for runners in behind. Didn't have that time. The pressure game quick. They had to play sideways or backwards or just hopeful first-time balls around the corner. Now, because that pressure isn't coming from the Liverpool midfield three in particular, opposition players are having time to have a touch, have a look up, and now players are timing their runs in behind. Balls are being delivered with quality, and that Liverpool high line now is being exposed more than it's ever been. So all of those things come into play. But I don't think it's a case of tearing it all up and starting again. I still feel as if there's the bones, there's the core of a core group of players there that you can work with going forward, particularly in forward areas. Gakpo coming in.
A lot of talent there, yeah.
Diaz coming in. They're all there. Salah's a different kettle of fish. Again, physically, I don't think for me, in terms of how he covers ground, can't do as he did in his prime. Yeah. I think there's more of an argument for him and maybe a central area kind of going forward to get the best out of him. Probably still Liverpool's best finisher. So all of those other things on the periphery kind of talking points, but the basic fundamental doesn't change. You've got some lovely footballers in there. Harvey Elliott, I'm a big fan of. Thiago, a technician, wouldn't be his biggest fan personally myself, but technically a very good player. But if you're going to put those players into the Liverpool team, the central area of the pitch, that's a totally different beast.
Right.
That's a totally different beast to what we've seen from the successful Liverpool team of the past couple of years. And that's that. You're not going to get your heavy metal, heavy rock
mentality monsters.
Playing with those players in that central area of the pitch. I'm sure Klopp understands that. So a big summer ahead for Liverpool in that respect. And even for Klopp himself, in terms of, I think it was the Brighton game, Eric, this season I watched. They lost badly, and I mean badly. Yeah. And they were just like, Brighton ran all over them. Mm-hmm. Absolutely every aspect of the game. It was like, oh my God. And after that game, I almost looked at Klopp, and it was almost one of those moments he had to take himself away, get back home. But when he got back home that night, up into the attic, put that little small lamp on in the corner, and sit in a rocking chair like a Stephen King novel, and just think about whether he has almost like mentally the energy, the drive to go and do that kind of. It's like a mini rebuild in that Liverpool team. And that's not easy yet, because he's put that team together, those players, and they've gone to war for him over the years. And there's a couple of players there now, obviously you're looking at, you think, you got to push them aside. You got to tap them on the back. Thanks for what you've done, but we've got to move on. That's not an easy thing to do.
What kind of players were you talking about there, Kenny? Like, which players would you move on?
Yeah, well,
now?
I think players that I've spoken with, like Fabinho, I'd say. If you're going to change the setup, and you're going to maybe a midfield two in there. Fabinho, again, in terms of, can you carry a player like that? Lack of athleticism, lack of legs in that central area of the pitch. Very difficult in the Premiership for me to carry a central midfield like that. Jorginho's another example for me. I've always looked at weakness. When you haven't got the ball, a weakness. Somebody in centre midfield, very kind of one-paced. You know what I mean? Hasn't got that kind of acceleration, that little bit of turbo in there. So yeah, I'd probably reference Fabinho. Henderson's a little bit different, I think, in terms of personality around the football club. Still think potentially around the squad you could use him, but in terms of that starting 11 for me, probably more difficult. You mentioned a point about Klopp. If he wants to do this rebuild, there's some difficult decisions. Yeah. There's an obvious loyalty, and I understand that. Very good man-to-man management. He's tight with that dressing room. There's a bit of proper love in there, isn't it, with his players? And that's why they've had the success they've had. But there comes a point when that drop-off comes that you got to make those decisions. Interesting if he feels he's the man to do that, and manage that kind of rebuild at the football club.
I'm going to move on now because you said I wouldn't mention it, but I am going to mention it. Manchester United, Ten Hag. Since Man United won the Carabao Cup final, they've played 3 matches. They haven't scored a goal. They've suffered a 7-0 defeat, a 2-0 defeat to Newcastle, and 0-0 draw home to Southampton. Are people too quick to praise Ten Hag and what he's done at Manchester United this season so far?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go as far as to say that. I think in terms of the issues that he had started the season, in terms of the dressing room, Cristiano Ronaldo, we've all kind of been there, the poor start to the season, all the noise and negativity. I think he's done very well to kind of manage that, get the whole dressing room kind of back on side, and up to a point probably a couple of months ago, like you said, playing at a very good level. Speak about manager getting the best out of the group collectively. You could probably argue up until a couple of months ago, maybe 6 weeks, so that was the case in terms of consistency. He wasn't perfect, like, you know what I mean, but in terms of atmosphere inside the dressing room, pulling the whole thing together, a bit of a tactical
there seemed to be an identity about the way they were playing
some fixed
as well.
patterns in terms of, that was all good. So no, I think he deserves a huge amount of credit for that. But a dollop of realism as well, because there was a bit of chit-chat at some point during that run. Ooh, probably from the likes of yourself as well, Eric.
No, never.
Oh, see, you're only 3 points ahead of us. Arsenal drop. Who knows?
There was a moment or two in the season
were you buying into that?
I wasn't convinced, but I was like, oh my God, but look at the table. We actually aren't that far behind. But then, the wheels came off.
No, I never bought into that, to be honest with you. They just weren't good enough in terms. The drop-off was never going to come from City and Arsenal to the extent of opening the door for United. They're still short for me in certain areas of the pitch. Casemiro hasn't helped. It's probably exposed that weakness again in that central lane. I thought it was a loose performance Sunday from United. I was watching the first half, Eric, and the amount of kind of in-game changes which Ten Hag made. Started with Rashford up front, Fernandes on the left, like Rashford down the middle. Not such a big fan of Fernandes off the left, to be honest with you. Couple of balls early on down the side. I think it was
Leghorst.
Yeah, it was Dallow. It was St. Maxim pulled Dallow up the pitch. Balls down the side for Rashford. 1v1 against Cher. I thought, oh, yeah, this is a way in. And I think Rashford actually fancied his chances there. He thought, yeah, get enough balls down this side up. Fancy me chances 1v1 against him. Then 25 minutes in, there was a shift. Rashford found himself out on the left. Fernandes back into his number 10 role. I saw McTominay coming into the 10 role for 10 minutes before half time.
Yeah.
Almost as if he'd been told to get on the feet of Guimaraes in there and stop him affecting the game. Half times changes again. McTominay goes back to that deep line number 6 for the start of the second half. Substitutions come up, all of those things. And then to top it off, 10 minutes from the end, the substitution board comes up. I've never seen the likes of it. Your two centre-halves. Two centre-halves dragged. And I'm telling you now, Eric, nobody likes coming off the pitch, right? Yeah. But as a centre-half in particular, something about that centre-half position when you're dragged, it's humiliation. You almost feel it's humiliation. But more so than that, I couldn't understand it.
I was baffled. Martinez didn't look happy.
Martin wasn't happy. He's been over to Panama and Argentina, but that's part and parcel. He's used to it. These are seasoned players, international jet sets. But Varane for me was the big one. Now, no international football. No. You know, you would have had all of that break in terms of the lead up to the game. But United are still kind of technically in the game at that point. You're taking off your best header of the ball, and it was a bit of a struggle for them anyway in terms of set piece, in terms of Newcastle's height. Huge amount of height in that Newcastle team.
I took on McTominay as well, another tall lad, so we were exposed for set pieces.
So look, I'm not going to jump all over that. Oh, it's a joke. The manager's got to go. What the hell is he thinking? Because his in-game manager's been very good up until that. No, the substitutions made an impact. Boom. But that for me was a little bit of a mess. I'd say it was a bit of a mess. Yeah, just in terms of looking at the team, what exactly, probably too much tinkering. And I think when you do that, sometimes the players themselves are, gaffer, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You know, and Rashford to me looked like a player fed up by the end of that game. Yeah. It was poor game from him. He was kicking, knocking people over. His chin was down. Almost like, I really fancied it there early on, Gaff. You throw me out there. You've isolated him. I'm on the periphery, that type of thing. So in isolation, it wasn't great. But you're right. They're on a bit of a downward spiral, and they got a job on, because it hasn't surprised me Newcastle have found their mojo. And Spurs as well, though you can't trust them in terms of feast or famine when you're going to get from them. If they can find a little bit, Conte going, bounce back a bit, whatever it is, a bit of a bounce in the dressing room, if they can find something between now and the end of the season, it's going to be a proper fight on for Manchester United. But that was a given probably 6 weeks ago, Eric. Manchester United, so it must have been the chit-chat, not a given, but most maybe neutral people looking at it, giving United that third spot. Yeah. Champions League, pretty much, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Off the back of that run. And now all of a sudden, they're right back in it.
Yeah,
right,
and it could be Europa League football again. I want to ask about Bruno Fernandes, Kenny. You know, obviously, most United fans would hold him up there, saying he's been like a brilliant signing for us. But I suppose this season, his antics on the pitch have come to the fore. He's seen as this player who throws his arms up, he's moaning, he's giving out, he's in the referee's face. And what's your opinion on Bruno Fernandes? Do you think he's an important part of the United machine, or where do you stand on him?
Yeah, I don't mind the moaning thing to a point, but again, as long as you spoke about kind of Van Dijk, as long as you can back it up, in terms of performance, I think the lads generally will suffer that. I've played with lads like moaners. I was quite drawn to it. Can't have too many of them. I didn't mind one or two moaners.
Name us one or two moaners.
I couldn't name it two. I'm not gonna name them. But I like them, to be honest. That bit of whinge, always having a whinge and a moan of trying. Oh, Gaffer, this is rubbish, this and that. I quite buzzed off it, to be honest with you. But you can't have too many of them. Right. Can't have a cabal of them. They can't be influencing the dressing room too much. Yeah. You know what I mean? So Fernandes, I don't mind that side again, as long as he can back it up. So I think that's where the issue comes. When he first came to United, his stats unbelievable. That first 6 months, a year and a half, won a goals, maybe 17, 18 goals, the stats. Yeah. Absolutely phenomenal. So his stats, his numbers, we all talk about the numbers, don't we? Numbers alone, this lad's got to play. I don't think that argument is as strong nowadays in terms of Fernandes plays. Right. Like he's an automatic starter. I don't see that. And I think when Eriksen comes back into the team, it's going to be more of an issue, because I'm not too sure United can carry both of those players in that kind of central midfield area. Eriksen and Fernandes with Casemiro alongside him. A little bit what I spoke about before, that kind of real physical kind of physicality in that central area of the pitch, running kind of machines. They don't all fall into that category. Casemiro gives it to you a little bit. Eriksen doesn't, ball playing centre midfielder. I think for me going forward, it's going to be a choice between Eriksen and Fernandes in the team, possibly in that number 10 position. I think United at their best with their flyers. Take your pick down the sides. Centre forward's going to come in the summer. We know that. Then for me, you're talking about probably one number 10 and 2 central midfield players where they probably have to reinvest again. So actually, Fernandes for me has to do a little bit more. Again, Sunday, if you hadn't seen Manchester United play before as a team and you parked up and watched that game, said, have a look at United's number 10. I don't know what number he wears. Tell me what position he's playing and watch the whole game. You'd literally been scratching your head at the end of it. He's so loose sometimes in terms when United have possession. Deep midfield, out in the wing, full back positions getting the ball. And I like that to an extent there. He takes responsibility, wants to get on the ball and kind of make things happen. But for me, he's kind of really loose in terms of how he operates. And for me, you've almost got to play him as that 10 behind the front striker and protect him a little bit. It's not as if he doesn't work hard enough, but he's a bit like headless chicken out possession of the football. I still don't trust him when you haven't got the ball.
Right.
I like the qualities he has in possession, but for me, he actually has to do a little bit more in terms of assists and goals going forward. So for me, his future probably is behind the central striker with 2 kind of top-class midfielders behind them. Probably they got one of them in Casemiro. I think they have to get another one. And if they do get another one in that central midfield area, then for me the conversation is going to be about Eriksen or Fernandes, who plays in that number 10 position behind that top class, upwardly mobile striker.
Yeah, I think Eriksen's been a massive loss to them. I think before he was injured, he was second highest for assists in the Premier League. For a player who's we all saw what happened to him in the tournament that time, and he came back.
He gives you an element of control. So that game Newcastle, he gives you an element of control. He can get McTominay and Sabitzer. They're not ball players. No. They're not quarterbacks going to get on the ball, lend to get it back and kind of dictate the tempo. They're forward attacking midfielders, want to get forward in advanced areas of the pitch. Eriksen will drop in there, get on the ball. He controls things, take the ball away from the opposition, even if you're not hurting teams with the ball. So that's important. He gives you that. But you can't tell me Christian Eriksen's a big asset to Manchester United out of possession in that central midfield area when teams are putting the pressure on. You know what I mean? When he's got to get close to make it crunch and tackle, physically impose himself, or track an opposition midfield runner 30 yards into the penalty box. That's not his. So that's what I'm talking about. Eriksen is an orthodox number 6 alongside Casemiro. It makes me uneasy. Maybe that's my kind of mindset. But in the Premier League, I don't like to see that. Eriksen is a 10. Eriksen in a kind of midfield 3, right side at 8, maybe. So that's the interesting thing for me going forward. How kind of Ten Hag sees it, where he feels he needs to strengthen. But he certainly needs to strengthen because there's no guarantee this current crop of Manchester United players is even going to get Champions League football by the end of the season for the reasons that we've said. So to make that next big step up in terms of competing with Manchester City and certainly Arsenal look as if they're going to stay the course over the next 2 or 3 years, that's a significant step, Eric, in terms of Manchester United.
Just on that, Kenny, the title race, Arsenal and City, and I'm looking at Arsenal all season, and the way I'm looking at Arsenal this season is the way I looked at Leicester that time when they won the league, going, eventually they're going to falter, but they don't. They've had a couple of little wobbles, but they just seem to come back, and there seems to be a real togetherness, a winning mentality. When you look at Arteta, I praise the Arsenal board for giving them the time because it's the first season they finished 8th and there was a little bit of dissent around the ground. But he has come in and he's created this team ethic, this squad who have all bought into what he's saying. They're playing fantastic football and they look full of confidence. And I would confidently predict now. I think Arsenal are going to win the league. I genuinely do. As good as City are and in rich vein of form they are at the moment, I still think Arsenal will have too much at the end because the gap that's there already.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's even more. It's a good parallel, obviously, with Leicester, but Leicester done it a totally different way. If you remember Leicester, 4-4-2, deep defensive block. You know what I mean? Inviting pressure, inviting teams onto them, and just hitting them counter attack. Vardy's pace when he was at his very best up there. Kante, talking about centre midfielders, do everything like running machines in there, drink water alongside him, never got ahead of the ball, sat in there. So that's how they done it. But you're right in terms of the chit-chat, it's only a matter of time, and they didn't. They stayed the course, tight dressing room, strong mentality. This Arsenal team's totally different. Want to get on the ball, want to dominate the ball, want to kind of press high, get up to the halfway line, wonderful combinations, individual plays, absolutely phenomenal. And you're right, that little drop off did coincide. It was always key players for Arsenal for me in terms of probably at Christmas you looked at them and thought just 2 or 3 that you don't want to be without. Partey was one of them, maybe Saliba, Bukayo Saka maybe
Odegaard,
in that category as well. Odegaard to a point, although Saka could very easily come in there. Smith Rowe can play in that kind of number 10. So I think they had options there as well as he's played Odegaard, you're right. So that wobble, Partey comes out of the team, wobble. They go to Leicester, win there late, really open game. Could have got done there, didn't. Go to Leicester and win 1-0. Not at their best again, a really poor Leicester team that day. But got through it. And yeah, you're right, have found their mojo again. And I still reference the defeat to Sporting Lisbon. I was watching the game that night, Eric, and it was going to extra time, that game, and I was looking at it. Now, the argument's an interesting one. Is it best to stay in European competition? If you're competing for the title, best to stay in or best to come out kind of less games? No right or wrong. You can argue either way. One can complement the other, staying deep into the competition, particularly kind of Champions League, Europa or whatever. That kind of buzz factor, winning games. You can take that into your league games. Everybody's on and up. But I think I got a sense that night watching Arsenal, I felt, you know what, would be the worst thing.
Right.
Yeah, you go out tonight. For me, gut feeling told me this is going to benefit Arsenal. Get out of that competition, that Europa League, and then just pure focus week to week on those league games coming down the road. In
and
terms
no
of recovery,
nights. No
Thursday night terms. For me, that's the best thing that could have happened to Arsenal, and I'll think they'll reap the benefits. And likewise, City, the Bayern Munich games coming up, they'll have to kind of, Guardiola will have to kind of manage that situation, particularly if they get through it. If they don't get through it, a massive disappointment. You can imagine that psychologically, if they don't get through that tie over 2 legs, which isn't a given, with Tuchel coming in with his record against Guardiola as well. So, yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Arsenal are a good place, and I think Arsenal will win it. The atmosphere, you watch their games at the moment, Eric. You're watching their games at home. The place is up.
It's on wheels, isn't it?
And I'm watching it on the telly in the studio somewhere, and it's literally
because for many seasons
coming out
it was called
the
the Library. It was so quiet.
Yeah.
Since moving from Highbury to the new stadium, they called it a
I'm
Library.
talking to people who've gone over there of late and watching games, and they're saying, "Oh my God!" Even there, like you wouldn't believe it. The place is up. Playing and that, and they're feeding off that. The players, you can sense it. And you're right. The manager, the players, the dressing room, the crowd, they're all in it together. They're all kind of energized. So I agree with you. Yeah, they wouldn't want to beat out those maybe couple of players that we've mentioned ideally between now and the end of the season. But the fact they haven't got that schedule in terms of games, the likelihood is they will be able to keep those players fit in key areas of the pitch. So for me, that still gives them the slight advantage over City.
And Guardiola, you mentioned him there, he's obviously the hoping to win the Premier League, but I think earlier in the season, I think he'll always be judged on the fact that they can win the Champions League. Would you give City a good hope of winning the Champions League?
Good hope.
But look, considering who they're playing.
Big hope.
Yeah.
This isn't a Bayern team that would frighten you to death. The talented side, don't get me wrong, some really sharp operators, but Choupo-Moting might roll up at the Etihad this week. You know what I mean? He's not going to put the fear to death. I know he's had a good season, decent season in terms of goals.
What a career he's had.
Yeah.
From Stoke to Paris Saint-Germain to Bayern Munich.
Yeah,
Who's his agent?
What a story. Yeah, what a story. But he's doing it, to be fair to him. Now, you say he's doing the Bundesliga and a team which is kind of dominating to a point. Look, it's a talented Bayern Munich team. I think the biggest threat to City is the manager.
Right.
Tuchel coming in. Absolutely massive fan of Tuchel in terms of... Remember the job he done at Chelsea, coming in mid-season, boom, straight away.
Champions League
almost Champions League done that season. But very quickly, boom, 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 coming in, players set up, off we go. You could see him having that type of effect at Bayern Munich. He knows that Manchester City team so well, what it takes to beat him. Has some success at Chelsea. So I think he's the biggest danger. But see, for me, they'll never get a better chance. He's got to cut out the silly individual errors defensively, which cost them last season at key moments. Laporte, in particular, in that semi-finals, Diaz against Real Madrid, all that kind of silly stuff. Just smarten up a little bit in terms of your defending. Don't overcommit, leave yourself open, kind of counter-attack, etc. There's a bit of pace in this Bayern Munich team as well. So be smart that side of the game and just leave it to those forward attacking players. I know your mate Delaney's not a big fan of Jack Grealish, but I'd be the opposite. I'm all in. I'm all in behind Jack.
At the weekend.
Yeah, I like him. I like for he's unbelievable qualities for me. Mahrez, the other side as well. So there you go. De Bruyne, Gundogan, that's from 5 for me. can really hurt Bayern Munich.
Right.
Just be smart at the other end. You're trying to get rid of me, I'll
So,
shut up.
do you know,
Say no more.
Kenny, I'm very conscious of the fact that your parking is up now in a few minutes, and I don't want to get fined or clamped because that'd be added onto your fee. But listen, I could talk to you all day, Kenny Cunningham. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to chat to you, and I hope we get to do it again some other time.
Probably at Daily Mount Park at some stage this season.
We'll get down, we'll have a drink down there, Kenny.
That.
That'd be brilliant. So that's all for me, Eric Lalor, with the House of Football podcast with SportsJOE and William Hill. Massive thanks to my guest, Kenny Cunningham, and we'll be back to you again next week. Thank you very much for joining us.
You've been listening to House of Football, brought to you by SportsJOE and William Hill.